Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, the new president of the Kentucky Bar Association will join me. Bill Garmer talks about repairing the image of the legal profession in the wake of the Eric C. Kahn disability scandal and some other matters. That is later on Kentucky Newsmakers. But first, less than a month now until the start of the school year, and Fayette County's health commissioner is going to talk to us about what is required before students step on that bus and walk into the classroom. We'll also talk about how Kentucky is continuing to deal with a wave of deadly drug overdoses and the heat of this week, worth a reminder about how to deal with a hot Kentucky summer. Dr. Kraig Humbaugh is a pediatrician who served in the top state health post before being named Fayette County's Commissioner of Health, and he joins us on Kentucky Newsmakers. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Bill.
Well, Lexington responded this week, Doctor, to this week's extreme temperatures that we had. There were some pools that were at half price. There were some cooling centers opened up and so forth. How important is it that people take seriously the threat of overheating when the temperature is up?
Yeah, it is important. It's certainly been a hot one this week, and I hope that everyone takes some precautions to prevent getting overheated. So one of the things that we recommend is to drink fluids and drink them often. So stay well hydrated during these hot days. Also, try to avoid going out during the middle of the heat of the day doing some strenuous exertion. Even if you don't have air conditioning, if you can find an air-conditioned spot like the cooling centers or somewhere else to go for a few hours, that can help. The worry is that people could actually develop heat exhaustion or even develop heat stroke if they don't continue to hydrate themselves and stay cool.
One of the real concerns, of course, and I know you do a lot of preventive work at the health department, being sure that no one is left in a hot car. You know, and whether certainly it's children or anybody being
or
left
pets.
in there, pets, anybody for any length of time,
right,
can quickly become an issue, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You get that word out?
Yes, we certainly do. I just want to tell people symptoms of heat exhaustion are usually nausea, excessive sweating, headache, muscle cramps, and then, of course, if the body becomes overwhelmed, that can develop into heat stroke, which is a high temperature that you get, and that's a medical emergency. So for any of those things, those symptoms develop, need to contact your medical professional right away.
And it might be that somebody else notices it first.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. It won't be long before the school year gets rolling.
Yeah.
Hard to believe that the summer has flown by.
So a few more weeks, right?
Exactly. So as parents prepare for that, what do they need to know about required vaccinations, getting the checkups for the kids and so forth before they enter that school door?
Well, all children, whether they attend school, private or public school, or daycares, need to have an up-to-date vaccination certificate on file. So they need to comply with the state laws and regulations about what types of vaccinations to have for back to school. I would go to your provider and talk with your health care professional about what your child needs. But vaccinations are very important. They are one of the big public health success stories of the last century, of the 20th century. So it used to be that we saw a lot of diseases, especially childhood diseases, that were very serious. And now those are fairly rare. Occasionally you have outbreaks of whooping cough. We had one last year, sometimes mumps. But they're much less common now than they were 100 years ago, for instance. And so that's why vaccinations are so important.
You know, some parents have concerns about vaccinations. If they do object, can children get some kind of exemption and still attend school?
So they can have a certificate on file which shows either a medical exemption if you're medical professional tells you for some reason that you can't have a vaccination, or you could have a religious exemption. Those are the only two types of exemptions that are allowed here in this state.
You generally feel, though, as you said, you think it is a success story and that vaccinations generally are safe.
Yes. So, you know, I think the harm that comes from having these types of serious childhood diseases is much more of a risk than the risk of vaccination. So vaccinations carry little risk. They've been given for many, many years and are generally safe.
As kids have had time to sleep in during the summer and they get ready for the school year ahead, I mean, that's a big change all of a sudden. You know, when maybe they were sleeping until 9 or 10, and now it's the first bell's at 6 o'clock or whatever. What can parents do to kind of get them in gear for that?
Sure. They may have to adjust their routine a little bit beforehand, which means, you know, gradually going to bed just a little earlier every night as we get closer. As you said, we're only about 3 weeks before the start of the school year here in Fayette County, so this is probably a good time to start thinking about that.
Do you share any of the concerns that some studies indicate that maybe it is better that at certain ages, high schoolers in particular, maybe start times being later could be a good idea?
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that for teens, the studies have shown they do need more sleep than at other stages of your life. So whether you get that sleep by going to bed earlier or getting up later, they do require more sleep.
Commissioner, the opioid problem is just continuing. It's ravaging Kentucky, as we know. We have this heroin problem as well. There were more than 1,400 overdose deaths and many, many other overdoses that occurred throughout the Commonwealth. Little indication that that is letting up. Do you think, as a public health matter, that is being adequately addressed?
Yeah. It's certainly a public health issue for us and for, I think, all public health professionals across the state. We see this as something that we need as public health professionals and as health departments to be contributing to. One of the ways that we're able to do that is through needle exchange programs, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that. But we also have other mechanisms that we use. We try to educate folks. We have programs like our HANDS Home Visitors programs for young families that teaches them how to be good parents. And that program also can help develop and the families better, strengthen families, and teach them about the dangers of drug use. So there's a prevention component, but we also have prevention for young families, but we also have the prevention side in terms of our needle exchange program for folks who are unfortunately already injection drug users.
And we have a hepatitis C rate higher than any in the nation.
That's right.
Do these needle exchange programs work? Do they address the problem?
Yeah. So, you know, you're exactly right. We have high rates of acute hepatitis C here. We also, as you said, have high drug overdose rates. Our drug overdose rate here, or our number of drug overdoses here in Fayette County actually doubled between 2012 and 2015. At the same time, our drug overdose death rate doubled. And at the same time, our drug overdose death rate from heroin quadrupled during that same period. So it's certainly an issue for us. Yes, these programs are designed primarily to prevent the spread of communicable diseases like hepatitis C and HIV in the drug-using population. And we do that by giving clean needles for dirty ones. The other thing that this program does is it provides a safe repository for people with contaminated needles to bring those back to our program, and they won't be risking other people out in the community. So there's a kind of a dual purpose there. But I think back to your original question, the scientific literature, some programs have been, especially in other countries, in place for decades. And the literature has shown that although they're not a magic bullet, they do contribute to preventing outbreaks and decreasing rates of these types of bloodborne diseases that are spread by sharing dirty needles.
Does it surprise you that the drug epidemic is as tough as it is in Kentucky right now, and that the demand continues to be there, apparently?
This is just a very difficult problem. It's going to require all of us working together. We're lucky to have, especially in Fayette County, some great resources, mental health resources. We have to work closely with our law enforcement partners, with public safety. It's not an easy problem to solve. It's a complex problem. I think what we're doing our part from a public health standpoint, and I know these other agencies are doing their part as well. So it's going to take all of us to put a dent in this opioid addiction.
Are you encouraged, though? So, even you know, I mean, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel, even as the numbers continue to worsen?
Well, it seems that rates are slowing down, but they are still going up. Certainly, the rates numbers that we're seeing in our needle exchange program, we're seeing steady increases. So, and that's unfortunate in the demand that we're having. So we had a record over 800 visits just last month, in the month of June, and we set a one-day record of 196 visits on one Friday. Our program is only open from 11 to 4:30 on Fridays only at our 650 Newtown Pike site. But we're open every single Friday. But like I said, on one Friday last month, we served 196 clients. Now, our program, we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary. We've done almost 6,000 visits in that time for over 1,600 unique clients.
Is that an opportunity to intervene?
Yes, it is certainly. And so one thing is we're seeing each month still about 15 to 20% of our patients are brand new. They're clients we haven't seen before. Another is that we're lucky to have partnered with the mayor's office and Chris Ford and his social services department to have a drug counselor and available at the exchange when we're operating. And she's there at the front, no pressure, but at the same time, they know if that's the day that they want to become clean, they can talk to her and she can get them right away into the counseling and treatment that they need. And it may be different for different people, depending on the type of drugs they're using or what their situation is. And she's qualified to be able to do that and to get them into treatment.
Now, another initiative you have is that you've been partnering with the farmers markets, trying to get some nutritious food available to folks who might otherwise not be able to get it.
Yeah, we're really excited about this. It's a new initiative we've had this summer. We're doing it in conjunction with our Women's, Infants, and Children, otherwise known as WIC, Supplemental Nutrition Program. You do have to qualify for that from an income basis, but the farmers markets are now happening alternating Wednesdays at our health department sites. We have one on the north side of town, one on the south side of town, so we're alternating Wednesdays. And they're available not only for our clients who have WIC vouchers to use at the farmers market, but also for our staff and for community members and people who live and work in both of those communities. So this next Wednesday, which I believe is maybe the 26th, we'll be having the farmers market at our 650 Newtown Pike site, but again on alternate Wednesdays. It is our 2433 Regency Road site on the south side of town.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in, updating us on what's going on with the health department. Appreciate it very much. Dr. Kraig Humbaugh, the Fayette County Health Commissioner. Now we'll be back. Bill Garmer, who is the new president of the Kentucky Bar Association, talks about the image of lawyers in the Commonwealth. Next on Kentucky Newsmakers. We welcome you back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Lexington attorney Bill Garmer has had a long and distinguished legal career. Now he's been chosen to lead the Kentucky Bar Association. His fascination with the law started when he loved to go watch trials in his hometown around Carrollton in northern Kentucky and see the lawyers operate. Now he's helping oversee the actions of more than 18,000 practicing attorneys in Kentucky. He recently said the scandal surrounding Eastern Kentucky disability lawyer Eric C. Kahn is a black eye on the legal profession. Bill Garmer joining us today. We appreciate it very much. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to be here.
So they got you busy this year, huh?
They've got me busy. Yeah.
Let's talk about the situation where you had made the comment that Mr. Kahn's actions were a black eye on the legal profession. How far does that go? He is convicted of defrauding the government out of $500 million. He is on the run. Was it a failure in any way of the Bar Association to not publicly reprimand what was going on and what was known for some time before his guilty plea?
I don't think so. There's a provision that the Bar Association can defer prosecution of a bar complaint if there's a criminal prosecution going on by either the federal or state government. Now, whether that was happening, I don't know in Khan's case, because we're not privy to that. That's in Bar Counsel's office, but that's a possibility as to what was going on. But in any event, the day he pled guilty to his criminal acts, he was immediately suspended from the practice of law, and that's where he remains now, and that process is ongoing.
Some lawyers from the bar have helped some of the Khan clients who were left with confusion and not knowing exactly what to do after their benefits that they had won through his actions were taken away.
Yes, and that's the upside of the story. Ned Pillersdorf in Prestonsburg and John Rosenberg in Prestonsburg and other lawyers really sprang into action and have come to the assistance of the people who have been wronged by Khan, and they're working every day and have been for the last 2 years in trying to help all of these people who have been victims of Khan's misdeeds. So that's the plus side of it for lawyers.
So when you say black eye on the profession, it's his actions that concerned you?
Yeah, I think anytime somebody does something wrong in any profession, and it happens unfortunately in every profession, there are bad apples, and they're the ones who get all the publicity and get all the attention, and he's one of the bad apples, no doubt about in the Bar Association.
Do you think that things like that tarnish the overall image of attorneys?
Well, I think that's what people tend to talk about when people gossip and so forth. I think that's what people tend to talk about. But I think if people think more fully about what attorneys do every day, and I say this all the time, there are lawyers out there every day who are helping people who are unrepresented, underrepresented. They're working hard, they're staying up late at night, and they're doing it in many instances for little compensation.
Pull back the curtain for our viewers a little bit, and you have been on all sides of this. You have been certainly a defense attorney. You've done the plaintiff's work and so forth. Over the years, you've taught some law. Let's say criminal defense attorneys, do they want to know the real facts, so that they can best represent their client, or do they want to be in a position to prove innocence no matter what?
Well, I think a good lawyer wants to know the facts, because that's how they can best represent the client. I mean, the client may be charged with something that, if the lawyer learns the facts, finds out that the client is guilty of maybe a part of the charge, but not all of the charge. So I think a lawyer really needs to sort out, a good lawyer really needs to sort out the facts and find out what the actual situation is to properly represent their client. So I think the answer is, do they want to know the facts? I think the answer is yes.
How important is it for lawyers to remember their duty to society and to the court overall, as compared to what it is directly to their client?
Well, I think there is a duty. Lawyers are first and foremost officers of the court, but then as officers of the court, we're governed by rules of ethics that we have to follow, and that tells us what we should do in certain circumstances. So I think we have a dual duty to the court and to the client, and I think probably our paramount duty, except in unusual situations, is to the court.
As a longtime practicing attorney, let's talk about judges for a moment and why you talk about it being an impartial judge. We live in a time where judges for the Supreme Court, it is known what their stands are likely to be. They are chosen because they have had a pattern of rulings and so forth, being considered liberal or conservative, and there's some anticipation of how they're going to rule before they get there.
Well, unfortunately, I think that may be true, although I think those of us who retain our idealism believe that once we go before a judge, and if we properly present the facts, that we can win the case for our clients. And I think that's true no matter who the judge is. And many times, I mean, what we really ask for in a judge is a judge who gives all the parties respect. And at the same time, a judge who commands respect in the courtroom, In other words, you know, we've had some great judges. Well, comes to mind Carl Forster, who was one of our federal judges. He was the example of that. I mean, he, just by his presence in the courtroom, he commanded respect, and he got respect, and his courtrooms were a pleasure to be in, but for everybody.
There have been rulings now that allow judicial candidates to speak of their politics. They can tell you whether they lean left or right and how they might rule on some things. Is that good for the system?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so, because I think that judges are supposed to be impartial, and I think to tell what their politics are ruins that image of impartiality. I mean, I think once people get into the courtroom, I think most really good judges, be they Republicans or Democrats, put those politics aside and look at the facts of the particular case that's before them.
Kentucky elects partisan prosecutors as well. They have decided that the judicial candidates themselves, the judges themselves, are to be nonpartisan.
Right.
Should the prosecutors be running under a rooster or a log cabin?
If I had my preference, I'd say no. I'd say that they ought to have the same impartiality and shouldn't run under a rooster or a log cabin, but should run as independents without their underlying politics be known generally.
When a plaintiff's attorney looks over a potential for a case, how much are they looking at righting a wrong? How much are they looking at in terms of money that might be there for their client or for themselves?
Well, I think the first thing you look at is righting a wrong, and was there something done to them unintentionally or intentionally by somebody else that has caused them injury. So that's the first thing you look at, and you look at the injury and you try to determine if that injury was caused by the defendant, and that's the first thing that needs to be analyzed when you look at a case, and then there's all kinds of variations of that.
Some disclosure here, you've been very active in Democratic politics for years. Stepping aside from that, the Republicans are accusing the Kentucky Attorney General of having conflicts of interest in dealing with some situations in which his former law firm may have been involved. How important is it that everybody avoid conflicts of interest, and does the fact that you were an employee of a law firm mean that you may yourself be tainted even though maybe you didn't handle those cases?
Yeah, I think it depends on the particular facts of the case, and I think it goes back to how far back did that relationship exist, and is it a presently existing relationship, or was it one that happened in the past? All those things have to be analyzed as to whether there's a conflict, but all good lawyers look at every time they take a case, they look at it, and whether it be the Attorney General or a practicing lawyer, they look at the case and decide whether or not they have a conflict, and if they do, then they need to step aside.
With Bill Garmer, he is the president of the Kentucky Bar Association for this year. We're going to find out about a conference that will be coming up next year and what he hopes to get accomplished in his term in this very important position. WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. We're visiting with Bill Garmer, who's the president this year of the Kentucky Bar Association. More than 40 years in the legal profession. Has that flown by?
Yes, I think it has. In fact, I hate to admit that.
Let's talk just for a moment. If someone out there is in need of a legal counselor, looking for a good attorney, where do they look? Because obviously it can go anywhere from a billboard or a spot they have seen to people who may have had experiences with a particular firm or attorney.
Right. Well, I think one of the good ways is the old-fashioned way, where you just talk to your friends and neighbors and ask them where they went. But I think now in this age of the internet, I think going online, most law firms, whether they're advertising on TV or not, most law firms have a presence, and they have a website. And I think that's a good way to get information, where a person can sit in their living room at 10 or 11 o'clock at night when they're looking for a lawyer and pull up the websites and just scroll through those various websites and look at the information, which is required to be honest, and try to make an analysis of who they think is the best lawyer to handle their case. When
you see young attorneys these days, are you encouraged or concerned?
Oh, I'm encouraged. I mean, I've taught at the law school for over 30 years at the UK Law School, and I have always been encouraged by the young people. I've always been encouraged by their enthusiasm, by their idealism, and I think that exists today as much as it did 30 years ago. So I am encouraged by it.
What do you see in this position going forward this year? There's got to be a highlight for you. It
is a highlight for me, and I'm very honored to have this position. I'm looking forward to it. The Kentucky Bar Association is one of the best bar associations in the United States. Year after year, we have the second highest attended annual convention in the United States, and we didn't quite make it this year because we held it in Owensboro, but even there we had a very highly attended convention. We're going to have it here in Lexington next year in June, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of June. So I'm looking forward to that, and then I'm looking forward to the other things we have to do. We have a KLAP program, which is a Kentucky Lawyers Assistance Program, where we have a very fine director of that program at the Bar Association trying to assist lawyers who are battling problems with drugs and alcohol and depression. That's a very important program because that's a big problem that afflicts lawyers more than other professions. And so that's a big program that we are always looking to improve and go forward with, and this year will be no exception. We're going to look at improving IT in lawyers' offices to make lawyers more efficient. So that's another program that's going forward. So we have lots of things on our plate.
Bill Garmer, thanks for coming, President of the Kentucky Bar Association. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning, and you make it a good week ahead.